Grace, peace, and mercy are yours from the triune God. Amen. This week, I struggled deeply with how to preach a sermon on finding what has been lost. As a community of parents and siblings and fellow members of the body of Christ, this week we collectively mourn the finding of the remains of Minnesota's own beloved, Jacob Wetterling. This story was new to me this week, as I'm not from Minnesota, but I have my own story of a friend from college lost to the mountains in Idaho in 2006 and found 1 year later. Today, as we mark the 15th anniversary of 9/11, we also collectively hold the pain of those who have been lost and have not been found, even all these years later. We are terrified of what loss means for us. It means absence. It means a rupture in the connections between us. It can mean death. In today's gospel text, we hear about two stories of things that are lost, a sheep and a coin. The story that immediately follows this one in Luke's gospel is the story of the prodigal son, a lost child. With these three stories, Jesus is telling a story to make a point about loss and being found. Our context here in South Minneapolis is far removed from agricultural pursuits. But let's try to get ourselves into the practice of sheep herding. Sheep are flock animals. They tend to bunch together, moving about in search of food. They keep their heads down. They don't often look up at what's around them. Sheep are prey animals. They don't have any defenses aside from their strength in numbers. That's why sheep are protected by a shepherd and sheepdogs. A sheep that was separated from its flock, its source of protection, would have been extremely vulnerable. Jesus asks, which one of you, having 100 sheep and losing one of them, does not leave the 99 in the wilderness and go after the one that is lost until he finds it? The answer to me and to most of us is probably no one, because we're being pragmatic. Why would we ever leave the vast majority of our sheep unattended to find the one that was lost, who probably fell into a hole or off a cliff or was taken away by a predator anyway? We would probably cut our losses, accept that one was lost, and vow to do better next time of keeping track of those pesky sheep. But Jesus states that the shepherd is not content to just let the one be lost. He goes out in search of the lost sheep. When it is found, he lifts it up on his shoulders and carries it back. He calls together his friends and neighbors, saying, "Come celebrate with me. I found my sheep that I had lost." He's trying to make a point here. But his listeners, the religious authorities, and all of us aren't quite there yet. So he goes on to tell another story. Sensing that perhaps his story about the lost sheep didn't land with the crowd, Jesus tells the story of a woman who lost a coin in her home. She had 10 denarii, each of which would have been equivalent to about 1 day's wages. Imagine if, for instance, you were just suddenly missing an entire paycheck, or your week's allowance. Just like this woman, you would turn on all the lights in your house and search everywhere for that missing money. I imagine that losing money is more relatable to most of us than losing sheep. I can actually see myself searching my house for a missing sum of money. But I also know that I would not be calling to my friends and neighbors to celebrate with me when I found my lost money, because I'm ashamed I lost it in the first place. I would want to pretend that nothing happened. Loss is a difficult thing for us. There are feelings of helplessness. I have no idea how I lost it. There are feelings of shame. I cannot believe I was dumb enough to lose that. There are feelings of grief. I will never get to see that lost person again because of death or divorce or addiction or dementia. There is initially a drive to do everything possible to find what is lost. We turn our houses upside down to find lost car keys or cell phones. Eventually, we may rationalize the loss in a pragmatic fashion, because things can be replaced. It might be expensive, it is certainly inconvenient, but losing things and money is not like losing a person. Massive search parties were initially organized to search for Jacob Wetterling, my friend from college, and all those who were lost on 9/11, and for others who have been lost. But what happens after the frenzy of activity ends? What happens when there is nowhere else to look, or nothing else to do, or we have reached the limits of our resources to continue searching? We are left with a crushing, impalpable absence. Open arms that desire nothing more than to hold a loved one again. A tangible example of the crushing brokenness of our world. On Wednesday night, in my role as a chaplain at Regions, I accompanied a family as they prepared to say goodbye to their son who would be donating his organs after brain injury. His mother said as we walked down the hall together, "I cannot accept that he is lost forever. He lives in me, and I will be reunited with him on the other side." This week, all I could think as I prepared to preach a sermon on the many things that are lost is that it is a damn broken world, and I hope to God that the light shines through the cracks. Loss is an excruciating reality of our world. We are separated from loved ones by death, by estrangement, by trauma, and by crimes perpetrated by others. Next week, we hear the gospel story of the prodigal son who returns home. But what of the children, or parents, or friends who never do return home? Whose loved ones remain with empty arms, not to be reunited on this side of eternity? Where is the hope? Where is the light? Where is the promise? Our God is a seeking God. Our God looks for lost sheep and lost coins and lost children. God is like a shepherd who leaves a flock of 99 sheep to find the one who wandered away. God rejoices when this one is found. God is like the woman who throws a party with her neighbors when she finds a lost coin. God is the father who greets his returning son with a banquet. God is the one who seeks over and over and over again. And we need not search for God, because God has already found us. And God does not give up until all are reconciled. No one is lost in the sight of God. Jacob Wetterling has never been lost to God. My friend John has never been lost to God. Those who lost their lives on September 11th, or those who continue to lose their lives around the world in acts of war and violence and terror, are not lost to God, nor have they ever been. Even in death, we cannot be lost from God, because God knows death. God knows the loss of a son to death. God knows death itself, for God moved through death and into life so that we might never fear it again. Death is not the final word for us. It is not a separation from God or from the body of Christ. But we fear loss now. We fear the pain associated with it. We fear that we may very well drown in our sadness. But we have been given each other. We live in a sacred, interconnected community of God's beloved. And we are called to bear one another's burdens and remind each other of our belovedness, apart from shame or fear. And I leave you with the words from Hattie Wetterling this week. Everyone wants to know what they can do to help us. Say a prayer. light a candle, be with friends, play with your children, giggle, hold hands, eat ice cream, create joy, help your neighbor. This is what will bring me comfort today. Hear this, beloved people of God. God seeks you. God has already found you. You will never be separated from the love of God. And until that day when the angels in heaven rejoice at our arrival, we remain found by one another. Amen.